This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, certified dream life coach, Debbie Spector-Weissman. This is the place where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams. Now you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. Here's a little fun fact I've never shared on the air before. Do you know why I call myself Debbie Spector-Weissman and not just Debbie Weissman? Well, it's all because of a reading I had with an astrologer many years ago. Up to that point, I used Debbie Weissman in everything I did. But she told me that using all three names is going to be much more powerful for me. And as I was in the middle of my journey for self-actualization at that time, I took those words to heart. And the funny thing is, I do feel more powerful using all three names. And since then, I've used them on every piece of professional work I do. My books, my website, my coaching, and of course, this podcast. And as an aside, I've been a big fan of astrology ever since. Like dream work, astrology has been around since ancient times, and its results speak for themselves. So many people, from rulers to stay-at-home mothers, have relied on readings to give them guidance for their lives. Like all astrologers, the ones that I've met are very dedicated to their work and use all the tools at their disposal to create charts that help their clients. My guest today, Michael Spremulli, has a slightly different take on it. While most astrologers use the wisdom gathered over the ages and believe it as given lore, Michael believes astrology should be evidence-based. He practices what is known as Vibrational Astrology, which uses science in its interpretation techniques. What it is and how does it work? Does it negate centuries of astrological practice? Well, let's find out. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Michael.
Debbie, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And Michael, we're just going to start at the beginning.
Sure.
It is Vibrational Astrology.
Vibrational astrology. What is it? Yes, it's a question near and dear to my heart. Vibrational astrology is the only form of astrology that is in existence that is evidence-based. Now, what does that mean? In real simple terms, it means that there is scientific studies to validate its claims. And I want to jump right on one thing you mentioned during the intro, and that it, of course, builds on the tradition and astrological systems that have been in place for over 2,000 years. But what it does is it hones in on what actually works and what can be replicated based on science and data analysis, and helps us understand some things that might not work as well as we may have thought they have. And just because they've been handed down for years after years doesn't necessarily mean that they're 100%. So that's what enabled me to really gravitate to this, because I have a data science background.
Well, how does science actually test this kind of thing?
Excellent question. So we'll start with the example of astrological signs. Most people know their sun sign. They're an Aries, a Taurus, Cancer, whatever the case might be. And common knowledge suggests that certain signs will tend to get along better in romantic relationships, whatever that may look like. I've heard that for millennia. Well, that may work some of the time, but here's an example of how VA kind of comes into the equation. David Cochran, who is the founder of Vibrational Astrology, who is still alive and well and doing research, and he was the one who figured out this system starting in the 1970s. He did a study recently of over 20,000 married couples to see if there was any correlation between which signs connected with which signs to produce a long-lasting relationship. 20,000 cases. This is not, 10 people at a coffee shop. Guess what the data revealed?
Tell me.
I am going to tell you. And before I get the pitchforks coming at me from other astrologers, I don't make the news. I just report it. There was zero correlation between which signs would fare better with which signs beyond anything that was just random or by chance. So you might be saying, well, then what's going on? How does this happen? In that example, it's not about the signs. It's the planets that pack the most punch. Signs have much less of an emphasis in VA compared to other systems. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that attracted me to VA is the data behind it. It's an evidence-based practice, very much like nursing and medicine and genetics testing. We look at the extreme case samples and see what's consistent amongst those, and then look at the data moving backwards to see how that filters down to individuals such as you and I. So it's a little bit of a different process compared to what's been out there for years. It's a more modern approach because it's blending the mysterious, the mystical, the ancient wisdom with modern scientific techniques.
I tell you, the example that you had from those studies is extremely interesting because I'm a Taurus and my husband is an Aries. And we were told very, very early on, Taurus and Aries do not mix. They
you see?
And we've been married a very long time. So we make it work.
So in vibrational astrology, where the compatibility would be found is in one of your vibrational charts, meaning that there's got to be something that connects people, and there is. And in vibrational astrology, we start, of course, with the natal chart. Everything starts with the date, time, and place of your birth. But then we calculate what are referred to as harmonic charts or vibrational charts based off of that natal. And I guarantee you, there is somewhere in one of your vibrational charts that there's a connection between you and your husband, and that's where the magic happens. The signs just give us a little bit of color and taste. I like to think of them as almost like a garnish as opposed to the main meal. And when you get into VA and start looking at how the planets regulate processes, this becomes a bit more clear.
Okay, well, can you go a little bit further into what a harmonic chart is? I mean, what is it composed of, and how do you figure it out?
So I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but think of it this way. The harmonic chart enables us, it's a theoretical chart. In other words, it's calculated based off the natal chart. It doesn't exist in its natural state. But think of it as enabling us to zoom in to different sections of a natal chart under high magnification. So when we're able to do that, when we're looking at the 8th harmonic or the 11th or the 17th, and they go up into the hundreds, the first 32 have been thoroughly researched. And then there are multiples and primes and a whole bunch of other unique cases. But we're able to really zoom in to a particular part of the chart to see what's going on. So when we're speaking of these vibrational charts, the research has indicated, and remember, this is all data-driven. This is not someone sitting in a smoke-filled room conjuring images up from their soul. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But the 7th vibration, for example, has to do with a stillness and quiet internal focus. So when there's a lot of planets active in that 7th vibration, it tends to suggest that someone is going to excel and have a lot of activities that focus them inward as opposed to outward. The 8th vibration represents our core values. The 11th vibration is where we're restless. So as a vibrational astrologer, I don't just go in and read down the whole list of someone's vibrational charts. I look at where the strongest planetary positions are placed, and that's where we focus our consultation because we want to make sure we're looking at what the client wants to look at.
So is the harmonic chart then based on where the planets are in your natal chart?
It is, but it's done under, again, magnification. And I'm you can get into the weeds very quickly with VA as far as how that works. Here's an example. And if you're listening in the car, go back and watch this because this will make more sense. Imagine that you've got your astrological chart, which is a wheel. And let's say we're talking about the 8th harmonic chart, which is a magnification, again, like 8 times of the natal chart. Now, imagine that you cut your astrological wheel into 8 slices of pizza. So now we've got 8 different segments. It's a vibration of 8. But here's where the harmonic chart or vibrational chart really comes into power. You take those 8 slices of pizza and you stack them up on top of each other. So now you've got that chart, and theoretically, of course, you take that chart, you stack those pieces of pizza up, and then you smash it down, and you spread that pizza all the way around to form a new circle. So it enables us to expand things that we just can't see in the natal chart because you can't zoom in there enough to visualize really high-level aspects of 1/16th and sometimes 1/32. So again, the important thing to keep in mind is that this is all a culmination of David Cochran's work, which started in the 70s, where he started interviewing tens of thousands of people, keeping detailed notes. And what's brought VA to the forefront is now through modern technology where astrologers can actually do research on a PC looking at large data sets. That wasn't available up until around 10, maybe 15 years ago. So now we're making discoveries all the time, figuring out things that are consistent across various data platforms, and it's very exciting.
Oh, what are some of the things that you can uncover with VA that you would not necessarily see when doing a traditional astrological chart?
Well, that's a good question. And I'm not saying that VA is the only way. There are over 30 different systems of astrology. And I always like to tell folks, you do you. There's Vedic, there's sidereal, there's Hellenistic, psychological, cosmobiology. So with VA, it enables us not so much to find things that you can't in other systems, but it enables us to do it more quickly. So if someone's coming to me saying, I'm really thinking about a career change. I've had some things rattling around in my head, but I'm not quite sure. Here's how I would approach that. I would scan the first 32 harmonics, and I'd see where the most action was. And when I say action, we're talking about aspects that are transiting, not transiting, but aspects in the natal chart that are connecting. Some vibrations won't have much activity at all. Others are going to have a lot. So where that activity is sets the stage for us to start exploring the core of that issue because it's going to ripple out. So here's an example. I did a consult yesterday for someone. They had a lot of action in the 17th vibration. You think it's 17th vibration. Well, what's that all about? Well, the research has indicated that people who have a strong 17 vibe tend to be very, very skilled in the world of empathy and stepping into someone else's shoes. Well, who are the types of people who end up doing that? Actors, counselors, people who have to assume the identity of someone else to step into the role and view the world through their perspective. So by doing that, we quickly now, without having to run around the chart and look at planetary rulerships and all this and final dispositors and a bunch of other astrobabble, we're able to see, all right, this person's got a strong 17th vibe that's dominant in their vibrational charts. So it's important for them to look at career options that are going to involve them either embodying somebody else, the essence of someone else, or tapping into that empathy because it comes so naturally to them. So it's more, I'd say, of an efficiency standpoint as opposed to what we can't do with other forms. It just helps us get there a lot more quickly.
That is very fascinating. And on that, we're going to have to take a short break now. We're speaking all about vibrational astrology with Michael Spremulli, and we'll be right back.
What do Thomas Jefferson, Elias Howe, and Paul McCartney have in common? They all understood the value of dreams, and as a result, the ideas, inventions, and creations from their dreams affect us to this day. What great ideas are you leaving on your pillow at night? Sign up for a complimentary consultation at my website, thedreamcoach.net, and discover why your dreams are a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're speaking all about vibrational astrology with Michael Spremulli. Well, Michael, in the example you gave us right before the break, you told us about somebody who had this vibration for empathy. When people generally come to see you for readings, are they coming to get career advice or romantic advice, or what is it that they're looking for?
It's all over the board. The array of folks that I've had cross my digital threshold would surprise a lot of people. A lot of people, astrology, let's face it, gets a bad, you tell someone you're an astrologer. It bothered me in the beginning. It's like, yeah, I know. It's weird. It's out there. It's a little fringy. But you'd be amazed at how many CEOs have come to me very quietly to ask for business advice. I've had people in religious communities come to me, which they said, you can't tell. I said, everything's confidential. That's, important. My background is that of a therapist. I did clinical work many, many, many years ago. So the whole concept of confidentiality, I live and die by. So no one knows who I work with or the content of that, including my wife. Not that she cares, but it's one of those things where it's important. So we get all sorts of folks who just need a little guidance, and from all walks of life, professionals, people who are independent business owners, people who are working someplace and may feel stuck, relationship thing. It's all over the board, and all are welcome, especially if you're skeptical. I welcome skeptics. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, but one of the beautiful things about VA is we welcome questions, because when we get questions and we get better answers, then our model gets better. So it's always evolving and not just locked in what was handed down from the ancients many, many years ago.
So you see, it's really just adding on to what is practiced before then.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it adds on with some things, but it takes out some things. Here's another thing, house rulerships. It modernizes, I think, is a better way to explain it. We don't speak in terms of house rulers and lords. I mean, they did back in the 1800s and maybe even, a little bit of the 1900s, but it updates things. Because if you look at astrology going way, way back, a lot of us are still doing it the same way it was done 2,000 years ago with minor adjustments. And the world doesn't work that way. The whole idea of gender in astrology, well, that's a male energy or a female energy. All right, maybe under that system, but is that really the most effective way to categorize things? And is there a more efficient, streamlined, and effective way to do it? That's another component of VA. VA is like an onion. The more you peel it, the deeper you go, and the more interesting patterns that you see in there. And another piece about VA, and I should have mentioned this sooner. All these other models are based on archetypes. Saturn represents the father potentially in the chart. The moon represents the mother. Okay, that's cool. But where do those archetypes come from? Archetypes come out of something. Archetypes are used to explain an energy or a process or a dynamic. What we strive to do in VA is get to the bottom of what is the energy process that's at hand. That's probably the biggest difference. We're not looking at archetypes, but rather what energy process is at play. And by looking at the planetary configurations, we're able to figure out how energy is optimally designed to flow for you. That's it in a nutshell. And then what you do with that is obviously based up to you.
Okay, well, let's say in astrology that I'm aware of, Saturn is in my house of Taurus, or it crosses paths or something, and that would mean something. So in your world, does that mean anything, or does it mean something totally different?
Not so much, because in VA, we're looking at multiple planetary combinations. So the one planet sitting in a house, or even two planets in opposition or in trine or what have you, it's not as powerful. We generally look at a minimum of 3 planetary aspect combinations. So you might have multiple conjunctions sitting together, or 2 conjunctions and an opposition, or a grand trine. Because if you think of each of the planets as regulating a particular process, and we've got a very defined list that we don't vary from, because again, this is what the data has shown. If you think of, let's say, the Sun, Mars, and Neptune, well, let's use that as an example. Well, in VA, the Sun represents obviously you and the current situation. The Sun brings things into the light of day. The Sun isn't all that fancy. It just sort of is. Mars, the archetype as well, it's the warrior. Well, it can be, but it's not always a warrior. Mars always, though, is about taking action and getting things done. And someone explained it to me great, another astrologer. Think of Mars as like a slingshot. It's where you're focusing that energy to go do something and accomplish something. And then you have Neptune involved. Neptune is what is magical to us. Could be the ideal career, the ideal mate, the ideal amount of money we're going to make. When we combine the energy of all three of those planets, if someone has that configuration in their chart, then they have got this circuit or this wiring or whatever other analogy you'd like to think of, that they have the ability to actively and intensely pursue, that's the Mars piece, whatever it is that is magical for them. So it's a different style of doing that. And as you, to your point, we don't really look that much at individual placements, but rather these patterns, which is where the whole core of vibrational astrology comes from.
Hey, do you use vibrational astrology to predict the future?
Sure. You can, well, I prefer the term forecast. I mean, predict, but yes. So, because we're still looking at planetary transits, and just for the benefit of your listeners, how this happens is your birth chart never changes. That's you. That's sort of like your cosmic DNA. What does change are the planets that are in the sky and the relationship that they aspect or connect to your birth chart. So we look at forecasting through the same VA lens where we're looking at multiple planetary combinations. So I'm not as concerned as a Saturn-Uranus opposition compared, which would be transiting, compared to maybe a 3, 4, or 5 planet transit and how that's impacting with the natal chart. Everything you can do in other forms of astrology, whether it's synastry, which is relationship, relocational astrology, forecasting, looking at the future, those type of things, you can do in VA. It's just a different modality and method to get to the endpoint.
Do you in particular do things like predict who's going to win the election or how many?
No, I tend to, well, first of all, no. There's enough people commenting on politics. They certainly don't need my voice, and I'm not a political analyst. I don't do many public prediction type of things. And that's something I thought about doing, possibly. But, it's kind of fun. I mean, I'm always looking at transits. I'm into the current trend. In fact, I've got them up on another screen over here because I just like to know what's going on. It's kind of cool because when you see what's coming in the sky, energetically, you can almost feel those shifts when you start to work with it. And you, with your work with Discovering Your Dream Life, I know you're tuned into energy and how things change and can change very quickly. And that's just the fascinating piece of this, because if each planet regulates a process, it makes sense that as you change the intensity or the connection of these planets, you're going to feel it differently, more at an internal level. And that's just amazing.
It certainly is. Getting back to the whole sun signs and everything.
Yeah.
So in vibrational astrology, does it matter that my sun sign is a Taurus?
In the grand scheme, not so much. I mean, let me describe it this way. It is not uncommon for me to do an entire consultation with someone and never mention an astrological sign or a house. Now, it doesn't mean we can't do that, because a lot of times people say, oh, you hear my big three and I'm an Aquarius rising. Okay, well, we can chat about that for a second. So in Taurus, so here, because we have slightly different interpretations for the sun sign. So you said you're a Taurus sun. Is that your sun sign?
I actually don't remember right off.
Just what's your sign? Your primary sign?
Is aside from Taurus and
yeah. So you were born then as a Taurus. Is that
right? Right.
Okay. So Taurus is your sun sign. So in VA, the definition for Taurian type of energy is to naturally want to allow things to unfold. Not necessarily have to get it done right now or rush. It's not the same stubborn energy of a Taurus. Yeah, maybe you can be stubborn. I don't know if you're stubborn or not. I mean, we're just meeting each other, and that, I guess we all are at some point. But just from that piece there, would you say that your approach to life and your work and the podcast and everything else, is it something that you're just crunching and driving and hard intensity, or is it more, let's set this up and slowly let it unfold and see where things go. Which of those resonates more with you?
Oh, it's the second one for sure.
So you see that's a quick example of how the signs, they give us some colors. So that tells me, all right, that's kind of running in the background, but that in and of itself, it gives us limited information. Now, what does that look like? Then we get in and look at the aspects. So there is a place in VA for sun sign stuff, but again, sort of like that garnish. And I hope that example gave a little taste of what that's like.
Oh, I think it does. Have you found an increase in the amount of people who are interested in vibrational astrology?
Oh, it is, I suspect, and this is just me doing a prediction that's not based on the astrology, over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to be hearing a lot more about VA because we're finally at the point where astrologers are actually conducting quality research with people who know how to do research. And there's finally some interest in academic institutions, which for years did a horrible job at studying astrology because they don't know astrology. What they would try to do is correlate a sun sign, and it doesn't work that way. But there's traction being made where I think you're going to start to see more prevalence of VA because of the fact that it is evidence-based, and some academic institutions are beginning to look at this and, maybe there's something here, because there's a lot of concepts in VA that are identical to the concepts that are in physics, which is very interesting. Same type of theories, same type of the whole idea of entanglement theory. One thing here affects something over here, and that's very exciting.
Oh, it sounds it. Well, Michael, how'd you get interested in astrology?
Someone gifted me a reading many, many years ago. I knew nothing about astrology other than the horoscopes that I read in the paper, which have nothing to do with professional astrology. Even though I do daily updates, I equate them to the junk food of the astrology world. A little bit is good. You don't want to make any life decisions off of that. It gives you a general tone. But I saw this astrologer many years ago who knew nothing about me except my birth date, time, and location. And she proceeded to explain my life up to that point, included current situations I was dealing with, and then did some forecasting. And that's where the seed got planted. I had no intentions of becoming a professional astrologer in my early formative years. But as things unfold, now you mentioned Taurus for a second. I have Taurus. If we're using traditional astrology, and you can blend certain just from one element to another. I have Taurus at my midheaven, which is the career section of the chart traditionally, which if we look at it through that lens, it's like, well, I couldn't have done this sooner if I wanted to. It needed to unfold naturally, as opposed to me saying, I'm going to be an astrologer. It just sort of morphed. And then I started getting books and reading and studying, and then got professional software to do the calculations. And the rest is history, as they say.
Well, Michael, how can people find out more about you and your work?
Sure. So they can go to blueridgeastrology.com. I've got a special gift for your listeners who've made it this far. And that is, I normally sell 1-month transit reports, which gives you a personalized forecast for you for an entire month. Normally sell them for $10 a piece. But if you use the code DREAM at checkout, that'll zero that out, and you'll have that with my compliments. So all you got to do is go to blueridgeastrology.com, click on Transit Report, select the 1-month option, and type the word DREAM in the checkout box, and you'll get a free transit report with my compliments. You can also find me on all the socials. I put daily updates on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, all under the same moniker, Blue Ridge Astrology.
Wonderful. Michael, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today.
Well, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. We should do it again.
Oh, I'd love to. Well, we've been speaking about vibrational astrology with Michael Spremulli. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio.